Hey, hi, and howdy to all my sweet friends. Welcome back to my channel. And if you are new, thank you so much for joining me and welcome. My name is Courtney. I am a stay-at-home homeschooling mom. I do a lot of food and kitchen content from grocery hauls to cooking videos. I hope you'll stick around and join me here by subscribing. All right, y'all, this week is going to be pretty short. I only have two recipes. If you saw my video on Thursday, you know that we have been sick. I don't know if we're allowed to say it on YouTube or not. I couldn't find an exact rule, but we have all got COVID. We have tried to avoid it for all these years, and we finally caught it. It really wasn't terrible as far as, what I've heard, but I will say we have been super tired, super run down, and there is a serious lack of appetite, which is why there's only two meals. So let's kick it off with these two soups I made for my family because we were all feeling yucky this week. First off is potato soup. This is my husband's absolute favorite. So I always serve it with crusty croutons on top. I just start by taking a loaf of French or Italian bread. It really doesn't matter, whatever you have on hand, and I cube it up into bite-sized pieces. Then I had just finished making my confit garlic, so I put a little ladle of that garlic oil straight from the pot onto the bread cubes, and then I melted some it was really just Blue Bond and not real butter. You should use real butter, but I didn't have an open pack. It was all in my freezer, so I just went with Blue Bond because that's what I had available. I melted up just a little bit of that and poured it over these croutons so that they all have some butter and oil on them. And I'm going to spray them out on this parchment lined baking tray and try to get them in like a nice single file, like just not stacked on top of each other. Typically I do this in a skillet, but I was really just not feeling great, so I decided to let the oven do the work for me and just toast them this time. I like to season mine with salt and pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and a little bit of paprika. But I have in the past used the everything but the bagel seasoned bread that Walmart makes, and that is phenomenal. So if you have some everything but the bagel seasoning, I think that would taste fantastic on your croutons here because it sure is delicious when I use that bread to make croutons. But on this particular day, I just kind of went with something simple and traditional and grabbed some spices that were right in front of me on my spice rack. And then I'm going to toast this in the oven. I cranked it up to 400 degrees and I toasted them for about 6 minutes on one side and then flipped them over for another few minutes. So now I've got the pot that I used to make the garlic oil. That's why there's a little bit of oil and a little bit of garlic and stuff in there. I didn't bother washing it out because we're going to cook in it right now. So I threw in a little bit of extra butter and some onions that I diced up, just one big onion for me. And I'm going to let this kind of saute for a couple of minutes. I do want to go ahead and tell you it's better if you salt and pepper your onions while you're trying to soften them like this, just because it'll make the process go just a little bit faster. Onions can take a little while to soften, so the salt helps to pull some of the liquid out and just makes everything come together a bit quicker. I also had some ham. I had pulled a Carver ham out of my freezer. If you don't know, those are like the smaller ones. You can buy them at the grocery store. They're usually maybe 2 pounds, sometimes 3 to 4. I pick them up whenever they're on markdown at Market Street, and I can usually get them there or at Sam's Club for like, $3 to $4. It's a really phenomenal deal if you wait until after the holidays and after Easter. And I'll just chunk them in my freezer. You can make sandwiches with them or use them for soups and all kinds of stuff. So I pulled one out and I made a couple of different things with it. I threw some in here and I've got a couple of the end pieces that are smaller that are in my freezer so that I can make a couple of pots of beans. So, and I also made some breakfast sandwiches on Thursday. But I went ahead and threw the ham in there, and I'm just going to tell you right now, if you have never smelled ham and onions sauteed together in a skillet, you are missing out because that is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I do use ham in this because that's what my husband prefers. That's what the original recipe called for. I'm linking a recipe below, and I do believe the one I'm linking does call for ham as well. But you can use bacon. A lot of people prefer bacon. I actually like bacon a little bit better. But seeing as how I'm not really a soup person in general, and my husband is, I'm going to make it the way he likes it because he's going to do most of the eating when it comes to this particular soup. So we're just going to let this saute for just a few more minutes. Probably in total about, 6 to 7 minutes. We'll soften up the onions completely and get the ham ready. Once the onions have softened up and the ham is heated all the way through, I'm going to go ahead and toss in some potatoes. This is probably 3 to 4 pounds of potatoes, and I'm using Yukon Gold because I've discovered over the last couple of years that they are definitely my preferred potato of choice. I use them for everything except for baked potatoes, and that's only because they're kind of small. If they were bigger in the bags that I buy at Sam's Club, I'd probably make baked potatoes with them too. But they're not. I do use them for mashed potatoes, roasted potatoes, potatoes in breakfast burritos. I shredded them for hash browns, and I've thrown them in my potato soup, and I think they're fantastic for all of that. I know some people will say like certain potatoes for certain things, but I'm not one of those people. I'm going to say if you like it, use it. That's just how I roll in the kitchen. So I went ahead and seasoned these potatoes as well. Season your layers, especially when you're working with potatoes, because those guys can be bland. They can suck out all the flavor. They can suck out all the salt in a dish. So make sure you're seasoning your layers. So now I'm just going to add some chicken broth. If you watched Thursday's video, you know I made homemade dog food and I made homemade chicken broth. And so I just took my gallon of broth and I added about a teaspoon and a half of onion powder, a teaspoon and a half of garlic powder, and a teaspoon and a half of parsley, like dried parsley to it. And then I did probably about a teaspoon of salt and gave it a good stir. And it makes some really, really good broth. It's better if you can put those things in while you're making the broth from the word go. But I was making dog food and you don't want to feed your dogs onions and garlic and stuff like that. So I did not. I just seasoned my broth later and then just poured some right on in here. And I cooked that for about 15 to 20 minutes until the potatoes were cooked all the way through. I did test them, made sure they were nice and soft. And now you want to add in your milk, your heavy cream. I'm working with half and half, whatever it is that you have on hand. The heavy cream will be perfect on its own and it'll make a nice thick soup, but the milk and the half and half, you might want to use a slurry depending on how you feel about thick soups. I prefer a very, very thick soup. If you like a really thick runny soup, you're going to be good, but like I said, I like a really thick soup. So I did use a cornstarch slurry. That's just a tablespoon of water, a tablespoon of cornstarch. Pour it on in and just let this simmer for a couple of minutes and it will thicken up on its own. It's a really beautiful way to thicken up any sauce or any soup that you're making. And of course, test it at that point and see what you think of the flavor. I could just tell by looking at it because my husband loves a lot of pepper with his potatoes. I didn't need it more. So I threw in some more pepper, and after tasting it, I threw in some more salt. And I always finish my potato soup off with parsley. If I have fresh, then I do fresh parsley on top. And if not, like today, I just go ahead and do dried parsley. I just think it adds something nice. It's pretty, and there's a little flavor hint to it as well. There's our soup. I just tossed the croutons on top. They're so delicious with this. All right, on to our next dish, broccoli cheddar soup. This is one that I prefer. There's not a lot of soups that I actually like. I like this, and I'll eat the potato soup. I like is it Zuppa or Zuppa Toscana, the copycat recipe of that Olive Garden soup, and chili, and that's about where I draw the line. Just not a soup person. I do enjoy French onion soup, but I only like to use it as a dip for like a loaf of bread. It does taste good though. I'm just really not a soup person, but I'll make them during the winter. My family likes them, and if you're sick, it really goes a long way. So I started off by dicing up an onion and throwing it in the skillet with a little bit of my garlic oil and then some butter. The butter helps add flavor and color, and of course I like the garlic oil. It keeps the butter from burning, and it also adds that beautiful garlic flavor that everybody loves. You want to go ahead and saute your onions and get them going and get them to start softening a little bit. This soup works up really, really quickly. It is a pretty fast recipe for a homemade soup, which really makes me happy. I do, like I said in the last clip or the last soup, I do go ahead and salt and pepper my onions because it helps pull the moisture out of the onion and helps to soften them a little bit faster and just make everything come together quicker. I do like to make sure I keep my onions moving pretty frequently in here just because with the butter in there, they can go from cooking beautifully to a little too brown really, really quickly. That butter helps to kind of just brown them and add that beautiful flavor. And once I can tell that they're almost completely softened, I go ahead and throw in some grated carrot. This is a bunch of baby carrots that I grated, but really you just need like one big carrot. I just happen to have baby carrots on hand. And I like to grate mine. You can always dice yours if you want to. I just prefer it grated. It's probably because I know the soup needs the flavor of the carrot, but I really don't care for carrots. I don't care for peas, and I don't care for carrots, simply because if I want something sweet, I'll eat fruit. I don't want my vegetables to be sweet. I love things like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage. I even like beets, but I just am not nutty about sweeter vegetables. All right, so now that the carrots have had a minute or so to start softening up, it doesn't take long when you grate them. I went ahead and threw in some of my confit garlic. You could use fresh garlic if that's what you've got, or you could use garlic powder if that's all you have too. Just go ahead and sprinkle some of that in. I'm going to give that garlic just a minute or so to cook and heat through, because I do keep it in my fridge, so it is pretty cold, and once it warms up, it just kind of melts into everything. That's what I love about this confit garlic. It's like roasted garlic, so it's spreadable. It's like a butter. You just basically turn garlic into butter, and that is just absolutely beautiful if you ask me. So everything is softened and come together, and it's beautiful and ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in some broccoli. I like to use fresh broccoli for this. I mean, you can use frozen if you want. It's really not a big deal, but my preference is always to use fresh broccoli. I don't really know why, but it is. I know they say when you boil vegetables, you boil all the like really good stuff out of them. Most of the vitamins and nutrients get boiled out in the water. But in this particular instance, we are actually eating the water that they're boiled into. So in my head, I think that means that we're still getting all those vitamins and nutrients. And when you're sick, that's what you need. So I just go ahead and always use fresh broccoli. And I think it tastes a little better too. It's just me. I do notice a taste difference between fresh and frozen broccoli, but I've used frozen broccoli in the past, and it's really not bad. It's good. It works. It's fine. If that's all you have, go with it. So I'm going to let that broccoli kind of saute for a few minutes. I'm not going to like brown it or anything, but I want to give it a couple of minutes to kind of develop a little extra flavor in the pot. And then I'm going to stir in some of my homemade chicken broth. So because I boiled this with the chicken that had the bones in it and everything, this is a very gelatinous broth, and of course I stored it in my fridge. So I did heat it up a little bit in the microwave, but it still is a little bit gelatinous, which is totally normal. It's the collagen that cooks out of the bones, and it just goes into the broth. That's what bone broth is, and it has a lot of extra flavor. It's really, really delicious. So I added that in, and then we're going to add in milk, heavy cream, or in my case, half and half. I think you can use any one of them. You can even use evaporated milk. Whatever you have, go with it. I just prefer, honestly, heavy cream, but I have been stocking half and half lately, so that is what I am using. I stirred that in, and if you're like me and you like the thicker soups, you're going to want to probably thicken this a little bit. Like I said, I don't like watery soups. I like them to be thicker. I like them to be creamier. In general, I'm just really not the biggest fan of soup. I used to make a homemade chicken noodle soup when we were a lot younger, and it was really cheap to make, and it went a very long ways. It was not my favorite because of how liquidy it was. So typically I would just kind of eat all the vegetables and chicken out of my bowl and leave the broth behind, because it's just not my favorite. All right, so everything's kind of warmed back up. I'm going to go ahead and start throwing in my cheese. Really, the best thing you can do is to use freshly shredded cheese. But as I told you in the beginning, we were sick. We're not feeling great. I was exhausted at this point. I had been in the kitchen for a while getting all this stuff to come together and everything, and I just really was pretty much done with all of it. So I just used pre-shredded cheese. There is no shame in that game, y'all. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to make sure your family's fed, even though you're not feeling well. We all needed some meals to kind of get us through and get us over this. And the soup definitely helped out quite a bit because it is pretty healthy. I mean, like, all right, there's a lot of fat in it, but it has a lot of vegetables in it. So that really is helpful, especially when you're sick. So I stirred in probably about 1.5 cups of cheese. You can stir in more or less, totally up to you. And I didn't say this in the potato soup segment, but you could always throw some shredded cheddar cheese in there as well. I do not. If you guys are new, my oldest son does not like cheese, but he does enjoy potato soup. So if you want some cheese on it in my house, you just got to sprinkle it on the top and the end. But if you want it to, you could always throw it in there while you're cooking it. No big deal. As you saw, I did throw in another cornstarch slurry there. I did say it. I like my soups thicker. Just give it a minute or two to simmer, and it gets nice and thick, and it's beautiful. It's rich, it's creamy, and it's super filling. I didn't throw any croutons on this. I just served it with some of my fresh baked bread with a little bit of butter on it. That was that. those are the only meals I made this week because we didn't feel well. Next week, I'm hoping to make some more meals, but if you saw my grocery, or if you see my grocery on Tuesday, I'm going to tell you there's no meal plan because nobody was hungry. So I just grabbed some groceries and ran with it. Anyway, I will show you guys what I come up with next week because I'm sure we'll be eating. Hope you guys are having a great, fantastic weekend, and I will see you soon. Thanks for joining me, guys. Bye.